Hello and welcome back to Degrassi School's In. This is a very special, iconic episode, so I figured we would do something special for it. We've got two special guests here today. One is Jocelyn Claiborne, the Degrassi Kid, and two is if you're in the video podcast, I have my little Funko Lola. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Degrassi CSI, one of our friends, for getting this little Lola Pacini Funko Pop for me. Amazing. Anyway, let's get back to the guest. We've got Degrassi Kid here. Who else for the iconic episode It's Late?
Oh my God. I am quoted in the Wikipedia article for It's Late. I will claim that ownership.
That's because you are the Degrassi source.
Ooh, I like that.
I'm so glad that I could snag you for this episode. You totally didn't bully me into
I was going to
okay, not
say you didn't
bully.
have a choice. I said, I'm doing this episode specifically. I have a lot to say. I've learned a lot about it. I've uncovered a lot about it. I've talked to Linda about this episode. And this is like the staple episode of Degrassi. I think if anyone's going to learn their history about Degrassi, this is the episode to watch. And you've never seen it before.
And I've never seen it before. And we are doing something a little bit non-traditional with this episode. Usually I just come on after I've watched the episode and talk about what I witnessed. But instead, for this episode, we're going to do something fun. And that is we are going to talk about what I know going into this episode. We've made a fun little list that we're going to discuss. And then we are going to watch the episode and come back and tell you what I think, tell you what I was right about, tell you what I was wrong about. And
Yeah.
I'm very excited for this. You and I already talked about this to build this list that we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about what I know and what I don't know before we get into it?
Whenever we were building this list, there was a lot of times that I went, "Oh, okay." Like there's questions that you've posed about the episode that I've never considered before, especially because when I watched Degrassi this era for the first time, I wasn't like thinking about what's coming next. I was just watching it. So it's interesting to hear what you do know about the episode and what you don't know and what kind of questions that has led you to. Do we want to dive in?
I just wanted to quickly say, yeah, this is the episode that everybody talks about, and this contains I would say the biggest spoiler that was kind of unavoidable, which is the first one that we're
Mm.
gonna get into. But I don't know really anything else about this episode other than this first spoiler that's on the list. That is, Spike is 14 years old and ends up pregnant, and I know that the baby ends up being Emma Nelson, the next generation of
Crazy.
Degrassi. And then I know that the dad is Shane, who is a character that we don't really know that much about yet. I know that he's kind of been seen in the background and talked a little bit. We haven't had a focal point on Shane in Degrassi Junior High yet. And then I know the next generation episode where Emma goes and visits him. So I know a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about what happens to him later on, but I don't know anything else.
Yeah.
I have the pieces that I have for Shane's character are Emma's dad and gets disabled in some way where he needs
Oh
to be
yeah, you don't
hospitalized later
know.
on. I've
Wow.
heard, but I don't know, I've heard, I guess not trigger warning, but spoiler warning, whatever. No, I won't even get into it. I've heard what happens,
Mhm.
but I don't know for sure. So we'll leave it at
Makes
that.
sense.
I've
Makes
heard
sense.
people talk about what happens, but I don't know. But yeah, I know
Yeah.
Shane's the father, but that's about it.
I think what's really interesting about this is you're most familiar with Shane from Degrassi Next Generation. As we know, he has a different character in the original, so it's fun that you're going to be able to learn about him for the very first time.
I am. Yeah, we really haven't seen him. Same as Snake. We haven't really seen him as a real character yet. So I'm
Yeah.
curious if this will be the episode that establishes that.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, really like kind of the first story we're getting of Spike here as a leading
Yeah.
character.
Spike has really just been a background extra, that a very bright, noticeable background extra, not bright, but noticeable background extra. And she's had a couple of little supporting moments with LD and Bula in the episode Nothing to Fear,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
she's not a real person to me yet. So I think this is really going to be the moment where she's humanized.
Yeah, and the lore behind that, I know a lot of people already know this already, but essentially she was only hired as a background actor, but they liked her style so much, they liked her personality that they decided to give her a storyline. And this was really the script reading through for this was really the first time that she found out that she was going to be a main character on the show.
And now she's one of the most iconic characters of all time.
Yeah,
Literally
now
on
that's
your
Spike.
t-shirt.
I know I wore it for the special event.
I know. I
I'm
appreciate it.
I'm always on theme. I'm curious, one of the things that stood out to me the most is you're not really familiar with the timeline of this episode, specifically like when she gets pregnant, when she finds out that she's pregnant. What are your thoughts about that with this episode going in? What do you think you know? Or what are your guesses?
Well, the like little bits of spoilers that I've gotten, I know that she gets pregnant at some party, but then I know that she like I'm assuming she finds out that she's pregnant in this episode because it's late. Like it is her period, I would imagine. Like, so I'm just curious like what the timeline of this episode is from like start to finish of if it starts off at this party and then we get like I don't think Degrassi is typically the type for like a time jump, but it has to be like a little period of time for her to find out she's pregnant from conception to that moment. So I'm very curious to know where this episode starts and where it ends and how long she sits with the information of being pregnant as well. Like kind of just
Mm.
like the pacing of the episode in general. I'm really curious to see because I don't know. Like I know it's late and
Yeah.
that's all I know. I don't know how it goes.
How how much do you think we get pre-established of her relationship with Shane before, the moment?
Well, in a previous episode you said I believe you were the one that said that her relationship with Shane was established in the background because they were like
Mm.
kissing in the hallway or something like that. So that I guess is some pre-establishment, but unless you really know the characters, I feel like you wouldn't have noticed that. So I don't know. I don't know if they're I actually don't even know if they're dating at this point, if they're
Mm.
you said it establishes their relationship, but does that mean like establishes just like they're connected, or is it like their boyfriend and girlfriend? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if they're even boyfriend and girlfriend when this happens, which is
Interesting.
like technically boyfriend and girlfriend. I don't know.
In
I'm very interested because yeah, I don't even know the full context of this because I know there
yeah.
are with Degrassi plot lines featuring pregnancy, there are a lot of different ones where sometimes the characters are like in a relationship, sometimes they aren't. Like Manny wasn't in a relationship with Craig, for example. She was
Mm.
connected to him. I don't know. I don't think this is a situation like that necessarily, but I do think there were some intentional parallels drawn in Manny's episode between Manny and Spike. So I'm wondering how much of those exist when we go back with Spike, if
Interesting.
that makes sense.
Because Spike is such kind of a newer character to us, we don't know a lot about her relationships and stuff like that. I'm curious, do you think she relies on anyone in this episode for support? And if so, who do you think that would be? Or do you think she's really independent in this episode?
I think if anybody who she's seen to be friends with, she has now I'm doubting my memory. She's been friends with the twins, right? We've seen
Hmm.
her I could see the twins being a good support system. Especially I feel like the twins are a very good device of like being similar but having different opinions and different inputs on a situation. So I could see the
Hmm.
twins being an interesting sounding board for Spike. And I know one of the things that I do know from editing your podcast is that there's a scene featuring Judy Shiner, who was the art director in Spike's mom's like hair salon, I believe. And then
Hmm.
there's like a conversation about myths that they believed about pregnancy as like teenagers and how silly it is and all of that. And I know that Spike overhears that conversation, and I'm assuming at that point she already knows that she's pregnant or assumes that she might be pregnant. So I I don't know. I know about that scene, but I don't know obviously when that takes place and what the context is. So I'm very interested to see that scene take place and to see Judy Shiner. I love Judy Shiner.
I know this is why I think it'll be interesting because you and I went on a trip and we visited the Broadview Clinic, which is where Spike ends up going in her pregnancy journey. We've been to
Yeah.
Linda's old house. It's been redone since, but we've been to the house where Spike gets pregnant. And yeah, we've been kind of in these areas in the show. So you'll see Judy Shiner for the first time. You'll see this iconic scene. You'll see those locations that we've been to. We've been to the Shoppers. She visits the Shoppers in this. We've
Oh
been the
yeah.
inside that or to that Shoppers together, and you'll see it because across from that is Playing with Time. So like it's funny that you've been to these kind of areas in real life through our tour together, and now you'll finally get to see the episodes that they appear in. Do you think her mom finds out in this episode?
I don't think so. No. I think that would be
Interesting.
really quick to have like her get pregnant, her find out she's pregnant and share that information with, because typically Degrassi likes to have the characters lean on each other first and then kind
Mm,
of go to a parent later. And I feel like I can't think of any examples. And I know that this is the blueprint for what happens later. I can't think of any examples where like a character finds out they're pregnant and then immediately is like, "Hey mom, I'm pregnant." Like I feel like there's
mhm.
always a buffer of reaction from their peers and then sharing that in the later episodes. So my prediction is that she will find out that she's pregnant but not share that information in this episode.
Do you think Shane will find out in this episode?
I don't know. I don't think so. It's very interesting because, like I said, I don't know the pacing of this episode of like how long she sits with the information. Because if she finds out like right at the beginning, then I could see her sharing it mid episode. But if she finds out like mid episode and then is only dealing with it for 15 minutes of the episode, then I could see that feels really quick. I'm thinking in like writing terms right now of like that seems really quick pacing wise, but like yeah, to me, I think I'm going to predict that Shane is not going to find out. I think Spike is going to find out and maybe share with a friend, but not share with
Mm,
her mom or Shane at this point. I think that's going to
okay,
be extended to a later episode.
that makes sense. So you think we're just gonna get, peek into their relationship a little bit, see what their dynamic is. She'll get pregnant. She'll find out she's pregnant, and maybe share it with the twins. That's kind of your thoughts going into this
Yeah.
episode.
The twins,
Okay, cool.
I think friends, and then I think the twins is my specific prediction as to who she's going to share it with. I could be wrong on that, but if I'm playing a game of elimination, I don't think she would go to Vula for that. Like I don't think she would go to LD. LD would feel
Yeah,
like not the person to go to with that like that situation. Just yeah, I think the twins make the most sense. And like I said, they're a good device for like being from the same place but having differing opinions. So I
yeah. They're
think
kind of the angel and devil on your shoulder
yeah,
sometimes.
the little angel and devil. I like that a lot. The only other thing that I know about this episode is that it was banned in certain countries for having controversial content. And I'm curious, when I watch this episode, am I going to be like, this is why would they think that this is controversial? Because a lot of times things
Yeah,
that were controversial back then, we look at now and are like, why was this banned? Why did they like, why were they clutching their pearls about this? So I'm very
yeah,
curious how I'll feel about if it's a controversial. I mean, to be honest, representing a 14-year-old getting pregnant is groundbreaking and noteworthy and shocking no matter what the circumstance. So I think it
yeah.
is going to feel controversial no matter what, but I'm curious if it's going to feel like something that shouldn't have been shown to children. I don't think I'm going to feel that way.
Yeah. It's interesting because the person, I believe her name is Loretta Robertson. She was the person who she was hired to do research for this episode, and she spoke to teenagers who were as young as 14 or even younger and talked to them about their experience of going through this. And she said the episode that got made is the episode that's the result of that research. So it's a very realistic take, even though, there's some things in here that I was surprised by to learn that teenagers really made some of the decisions that Spike makes in this episode. But yeah, that's what I'm really interested to see on the other end is your thoughts on kind of the realities of it, the research that went into it, the controversy of it. The last thing I want to ask you though, before we actually watch the episode, is you are so familiar with the A plot. You know that this is already going in. This is about Spike getting pregnant. Do you
Yeah.
know what the B plot is? Do
No.
you have any
I've
guess who else is going to
never
appear in this episode?
I've never considered that like in my life of what the B plot of this episode would be. I feel like that's like Time Stands Still and then the Joey B plot where it's just like like what could possibly be the B plot to this? I feel like it's going to be something crazy.
Yeah.
Some not something crazy like something what was the episode where Arthur there was an episode where Arthur and Yick had like a nonsense B plot. I don't remember. Anyway,
A lot of their not plots are nonsense, I would say.
but yeah,
Like every
I
episode.
think it's probably I'm gonna bet that it's gonna be an Arthur and Yick B plot probably. It's gonna be
Uh,
some in the nicest way possible, some bullshit like that. Like I love their B plots, but like it's gonna be something that is like so ridiculous in comparison to
yeah.
the gravity of a 14-year-old going through all of this. So that is my prediction for the B plot. I'm excited to get into this. Is there anything else you want to
Let's do
say
it.
before we start watching It's Late?
No, I'm just really excited for you to watch. I'm excited that I get the pleasure of watching this with you for the very first time, and I'm excited to
Yeah.
deep dive into it afterwards. I feel
I'm excited
lucky.
to deep dive. Sorry?
I said I feel lucky.
You are. And now everyone gets to experience that with us as well, which I think is so fun. Are you ready to watch the episode?
I'm ready. Let's watch. It's
I'm
late.
ready. All right. We'll be back, guys.
Be right back, Panthers.
BRB. And we are back, Panthers, and we have officially seen It's Late. Me for the first time, Degrassi Kid for the how many
Millionth and
times?
seventh
I was
time.
saying, how many times do you think you've seen this episode?
Oh my god, truly a lot. But it was really fun to watch it again with the idea of the fact that you were watching it for the first time and kind of in your lens and what to kind of point out and be like, look at this, look at this.
That's exactly what I was going to start off by asking is did it feel different this time around kind of watching it through the lens of somebody watching it for the first time, like
Yeah,
only
it
seeing it with that context?
it made me more aware of like it made me more aware of the fact that you don't know what's coming next and like you don't
Oh,
know like each scene was truly like a brand new scene and you didn't know where it was going. Especially I really liked that we had asked ahead of time your thoughts going into it because I knew like it was more exciting to see when she told Shane or when she told her mom because I knew those were things that you
yeah.
actively weren't prepared for. So that was cool to kind of see your reaction to the things that I knew were on your mind going into the episode.
I do agree. I think the little preamble was a fun thing that I might want to add to the process in the future of just like sitting and talking and like listing out what I actually know and what I think is coming next because it is actually it really made everything else hit a lot harder instead of just like fully going into it blind and just being like let's see what happens. Like I feel like I
Yeah.
really was like paying more attention this time and I think it was very cool. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that we had that little conversation and that we made this little list that we made a list after watching the episode as well that
We love lists. We
we
love lists.
love lists, neurodivergent people. We
Nobody
love
makes lists
lists.
better than me.
And
I
Degrassi Kid
love my
is
list case.
sorry. I love my list case.
I
That is
love
this is
my list
us
case.
debuting our impressions apparently as
Of
well.
the Trump family.
Boo. Let me just start off by saying that I really enjoyed this episode. Anyway, moving on from that. I really enjoyed this episode. Like I genuinely was like
Good.
this is a like really good episode and I feel like this kind of locked me in to Degrassi Junior High. Like it made me all of these the past episodes have been really good and like I've wanted to like continue, but this is like I get it now. Like I feel
Yeah.
locked in. Like I feel like I care about these characters in a way that I didn't before. And I'm
Hmm.
just really intrigued and excited to see what's going to happen moving forward. Like I was excited about it mostly
Yeah.
because like I want to watch Degrassi in full and I want to experience all of Degrassi and I want to make this podcast. So like I've had that excitement, but now I feel like I have a
Yeah.
new level of excitement of like I'm invested plot wise as well.
It's
Like these characters feel real, if that makes
I
sense.
think it's also the one of the first times that they end on a oh my god what's going to happen next, because it with her storyline comes, well, is she going to pursue other things, is she going to have we know she's going to have the baby, but like what is
Yeah.
that process, when does she have the baby, whereas every other storyline, yes, it's huge, but like we're not left wondering, oh, like what's going to happen to them tomorrow when they go to school. They've kind of wrapped up the story and they wrapped it up here, but there's still so much like what's going to happen.
A comparison that I can think of is the episode with Rick Monroe, the cover up,
Mm,
where that was like another big story where something big was happening and I feel like we're waiting for like what's the next step of it, but that was an external force affecting Rick and he moved
yeah.
out and all of that. This is literally an internal force. Like this is not avoidable. She can't move to another house and go live with her brother or whatever and be fine. Like this literally is inside of her. Scary. We can
There's so much
scary,
consequence.
but like
we're both scared of pregnancy.
we're
It freaks us
we're
out.
both fun fact, we're both terrified of pregnancy. So like sorry if that comes up in this conversation. It's a
Yeah, we're
miracle, but
icked
like
out.
we're terrified of it.
It's beautiful, but it's disgusting.
It's
Anyway.
beautiful, but it's scary and it's literally like it's like I was saying, like everything else has been an external force that we're trying to figure out to deal with. This is literally living within Spike's body, not even metaphorically,
Yeah.
literally living within Spike's body. She can't avoid it. She can't do anything about it. So we're going to see the progression of this, and I'm really excited to see where it progresses. Obviously I know like where it progresses at the end of the day because I've seen the
Mm-hmm.
next generation and I know that Emma exists, but when it comes to the in between of her the end of this episode and whatever episode she ends up giving birth in, which I have no idea how far away that is or anything like that. Another
Yeah.
thing that I'm excited to see how long this persists, if it goes on for like maybe the end of next season. I don't know.
Mm.
Maybe I think that might be my official prediction is that it'll be the end of season 2. Is that a long time?
End
That
of
might be a
season
long
2. Well,
time.
it's interesting because sometimes Degrassi does a season where it's a year and sometimes it's a semester. So we don't know, right?
I don't know about the timing of these earlier eras of the series,
Mm.
obviously, but I think when in those later Degrassi seasons, when they started doing those per semester seasons, it was like abnormal. So I
Mm.
think I
Interesting.
don't know because this first season
Well,
is
maybe
almost over, and this hasn't been a whole school year, has it?
I don't actually know. I know that they're skating now, so we know it's the winter time. But that could be December. That could be fucking June in Canada. So
Yeah, true. That doesn't
who
help.
knows?
That's interesting.
I wanted to ask you because I think it's crazy that this baby that we're all freaking out about is Emma fucking Nelson. Like, how do you feel about that? That you're watching like the true origins of Emma?
I got like a little pang in my stomach of like that's like it made me feel more towards Emma. Like this is I don't
Mm.
know, like it humanized Emma in a weird way of like I mean, we're learning her literal backstory. Like it made me kind of emotional of like that's
Aw,
the character that then we see like that's a big deal. Like that is
it's
actually
a big
so
deal.
crazy. It's I don't know. It's like going back in time and being able to like meet your parents or like your friends'
It's
parents or
surreal.
whatever. It's very surreal and it's so cool to see. I will say one thing, seeing Amanda Steptoe in this episode makes me so sad that she doesn't really get any time in Next Generation. Like she really
Mm.
disappears because she's
And
such a
she's
good
like a yuppie
actress.
mom. She's not like as like,
Yeah.
punk rock anymore.
Yeah, because seeing her relationship, if I think about like the key Spike moments later on, like her calling out that
Mhm.
guy in the mall for being a creep
Mm.
towards her and Emma, seeing that and then seeing this episode, it makes me yearn for so much more of older Spike. Because
Yeah.
I know where it goes, and it makes me disappointed that we don't get more already. Like it makes me disappointed in the next generation a little bit and how they handled the adult
Yeah.
characters. I didn't have expectations before, and now I'm kind of like, oh, they could have done them better, you know?
Yeah, right? It's interesting to say that. I have two things I want to say, but the first one, just really quickly, I feel so lucky. This is why I love Degrassi's because we have this, like, what other shows do this where you can jump back in time and meet the parents of your favorite characters? Like, that's crazy, especially from our
Yeah.
perspective of watching TNG first. But the question I actually want to ask you, I know we're going to get into parallels later, but while we're on this topic, the scene where Emma is upset with Manny about having an abortion and contemplating abortion and says, well, that could have been me. What are your thoughts on that scene now that you've kind of seen Spike going through this?
That is a really interesting question, actually.
It
Because
makes it real. It's not longer
yeah,
hypothetical. It's like we've seen it now.
yeah, and on the point of you saying like it's very unique that we get to go back in time and see our favorite characters' parents, I think there are shows that exist where they're like, oh, an origin story that they're creating after the
Mm.
fact, but this is
Hmm.
literally like being able to, yeah, like you said, being able to go back in time. And it's so interesting. Yeah, so
Mm.
interesting to see Spike handle that. And that makes, I really want to go back and watch the episode with Manny now and
Hmm.
see Spike passing on her wisdom and passing on her experience because like obviously
Yeah.
I knew that she got pregnant and that she had Emma and all that kind of stuff, but like I didn't know that I hadn't seen the literal scene, like the literal like
Yeah.
play I watched it play out before my eyes.
And this is the story that Emma would have heard growing up, right? As these stories of like, well, then I contemplated this, and I contemplated that, and your father wasn't really around and that kind of stuff. That like now we then got to see it
Yeah.
happen in this episode.
an interesting parallel that we sort of brought up was Spike talking to the twins versus
Mm.
the boys talking to Shane about sex and how different it is.
This is one of the things that really stands out to me. I think one of the things we're going to echo a lot in this podcast is that Degrassi is so good at being a sex ed show without feeling like a sex ed show. And I love the parallel they had. Shane's talking to the boys. It's very like, oh, yeah, we've all had sex, even though he's like, it's not my responsibility, right? He's asking all these questions amidst this air of like, oh, yeah, we've all done it. And then in the girls' side, it's so serious and more grim and her facing the actual reality of like, they say, she says, I think I'm pregnant. And they say, well, you can't do that unless you've had sex. But the boys are like, oh, yeah, we've all had sex. And they're
Yeah.
facing the reality of like, okay, now we've got to deal with this. I wanted to hear your perspective on that, of seeing those two parallel scenes back to back.
I thought that that was really well done and very accurate to the attitudes of the different sexes at that age of just
Mm-hmm.
the boys very much, yeah, talk a big game, but don't know what they're talking about and aren't properly educated. And then the girls are scare tacticked into like
Mm,
not talking about it or talking about it as if like it's so taboo and just like the tone was so grim with the twins
mm.
and Shane versus it was so like celebratory and they're both like hyping each other up and it's very real. Like
Yeah.
the girls took things very seriously as they have to, and then the boys very much represent that attitude of like, oh, it's not our responsibility, right?
Yeah. Sex is fun. But for women, sex is a responsibility.
Sex is serious.
You face the consequences of having sex, basically. I also liked in that bathroom scene, because we had talked in the pre talk about this, that the twins are the devil and angel. And we see one of them say, you can't get pregnant for the first time. And the other one says, well, I don't think that's true. I think that was something we pinpointed right in the beginning. And that's the scene where we really see it, them two having different opinions. And again, having a sex talk without having a sex talk.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm proud of myself for predicting that one. But it's just like
Yeah.
what makes that's just what makes narrative sense because they're this built-in, like I said, this built-in like yeah, opposing forces that come from a very similar place. It just makes
Yeah.
sense that they would be the ones that she would lean on. And I think they did that so well. And like you said, the sex education without being sex education, these conversations and the way that they are framing it, instead of being a lecture, instead of feeling like they're just reading off of a pamphlet and telling you all the facts, it's like real experiences and things that real kids hear and say like there is so much misinformation about sex education. And this is so much more effective than if we had just had a scene where we're just sitting in the classroom and watching Dr. Sally like lecture the kids. Like
Yeah.
that's not going to stick. That's not going to it's not the real world it's not the real world experience that people
Yeah.
are that the kids are applying to their real life. So I think those conversations and the scene with our queen Judy Shiner later on.
I wanted to ask you, you finally seen it. You've seen the scene. What do
I
you think
love
about
her.
Judy's iconic scene?
She did so good, first of all. She did so well. I loved seeing that, and I thought that that was so effective, so well done. Instead of Spike being lectured to, like I said earlier, she's, like, overhearing this conversation and, like, kind of in a way listening up to the conversation instead of
Mhm.
being spoken down to because the conversation isn't targeted at her. If Judy Shiner and her mom were just standing there being like, that's not true. Like you need to know this and you
Mhm.
need to know that. Like they're literally not even like talking to Spike. They're talking to each other and Spike is overhearing it. That makes her take things more seriously because it's not through that lens of her mom trying to speak to a child. It's her mom speaking to another adult. So she's going to take it
Yeah.
more seriously. And I really liked the framing of that.
I love how you compare it, instead of being spoken down to she's listening up, because I think you're right. If in that moment she had turned to her daughter and been like, why are you asking me that? And that
Yeah.
conversation, she would have closed down a lot. But instead, even the audience, not just Spike, but even the audience is hearing these things of like, some of the myths are like, if you close your eyes, you can't get pregnant. If you stand up during sex, you can't get pregnant. It's such a testament to the fact that the Degrassi knows that the kids who are watching that are doing the same thing as Spike and hearing what those adults are saying without feeling like they're being spoken down to. I think you've captured it exactly right.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because when Spike is directly confronted, when her mom tries to directly ask, like, what's going on, like, what's in the bag, she does shut down and get defensive
Mm-hmm.
and kind of like project all these emotions onto her mom. And then
Yeah.
they have that conversation, but it was so much less, it ended up being effective because she needed to talk to her mom. But if her mom had
Yeah.
talked to her in that moment of unsureness, then she would have shut down, like you said. So I'm really glad
Yeah.
they had that like peer of her mom to have that conversation with.
This is what I also wanted to ask you, because you were in the beginning, you had talked about you weren't sure if there was going to be a time jump between her getting pregnant and finding out she's pregnant. You weren't sure if Shane was going to find out. You weren't sure if her mom was going to find out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of the pacing of this episode and how much they captured in one single episode.
Yeah, I thought that I at first thought that there was going to be a time jump, and then you kind of convinced me like, oh, time jumps. Does Degrassi really do time jumps? So I was doubting myself, but I
I
think it
want to
was
trick. I
well
don't want you to
done.
go in knowing everything.
That's true. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think it was really well paced. I know that I said that thinking that her finding out and telling Shane and telling her mom felt very quick. It did in a way feel, if I on paper it feels quick, but when watching it it didn't feel like
Felt
too
natural.
quickly paced. It felt very natural. It didn't feel, yeah, it didn't feel rushed. It felt very good. And I like where we left it off.
Mm.
I like that she had some time after telling Shane before she talked to her mom and kind of
Mm-hmm.
got that poor reaction. And that kind of I
Mm-hmm.
think fueled her emotions towards the breakdown with her mom later on. I think if she had gotten a more positive reaction from Shane, maybe she would have hidden it for longer. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, but that's in my mind. I think if she had gotten a little bit more support elsewhere, she wouldn't have been so emotionally charged when she got home. I like that she talked to an adult in this episode. I don't think she necessarily directly went to an adult in the way that that's why I was like, I think she'll go to peers, which she did, but then she did end up having that confrontation with her mom that ended in her technically, quote unquote, going to an adult, even though it wasn't necessarily voluntary. She literally threw the pregnancy test at her mom. She's like, here, let me check
You
that
want to see
out.
what this is?
Like,
I
threw
agreed. I
it.
think maybe with the pacing, like if she had have gone to her mom, that might have felt too rushed, but that kind of innocent, like her getting caught, I think maybe made it a little bit more realistic than if she had have done the
Yeah.
test and then tried to sneak in going to her mom as well about it.
And the frantic energy of her, like that getting caught scene, like made my heart race
Yeah.
because it made me think about those times as a like teenager or kid where I like got caught doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing. It's like, why are you trying to cover it up? Like you're already,
Yeah.
she's
You're in
not
too
gonna
deep.
just be like, okay, like fine, whatever. Like you're literally acting so weird and so like like there was no way that her mom was just gonna walk away from that. And she actually
Yeah.
no, because her mom almost did. Her mom was almost like, okay, and then she threw the box at
You
her
want to
as her
see
mom was
what
walking
this
away.
is?
Like she's like, we're having this conversation now, actually.
It's happening now, mom.
Almost.
Mom, this is the third act. We gotta rush this up.
We gotta make this happen. You can't walk away now. We gotta get this out here. So yeah, I think it was well paced, honestly. And
Mm,
I didn't feel at any point during the episode that things were going too fast. Like
good.
it felt really well paced.
I felt the intensity of that scene. I think that's the time when we were watching it that we were the most silent and like tuned into the
Yeah.
show, because it was like we were like, whoa, this is high energy. It was a really really good scene. While
Yes.
we're talking about that scene specifically, we were really intrigued by Spike's room. What was your takeaways from Spike's bedroom?
Yes, one thing that I immediately noticed was Spike had some little stuffed animals in the background, and
Mhm.
when she gets upset with her mom and like starts crying, she grabs a teddy bear and hugs it, which reminded me of in Rumor Has It, Caitlin is hugging some sort of stuffed animal while crying about not wanting to be gay and all that, like struggling with that coming of age issue and then hugging the stuffed animal. So I really liked the return of that. It made my heart like melt because they are just like little kids and
So innocent.
it's so innocent. And I liked the balance of she had those like kid like things in her room, but then she had a couple of posters and was starting to personalize. You can tell that she's like starting to put her personal touch on as this version of Spike, this like rebellious, stylish, whatever, which she doesn't seem rebellious in personality. She still seems pretty tame personality wise. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that she has this very like outlandish style because her
Yeah.
personality doesn't really, I wouldn't say her personality matches the stereotype of like a girl that would dress like that. So I like
Yeah.
that. She's hugging a little teddy bear.
Hugging a little
Uh
teddy bear. I know, I thought that was so sweet. I loved, Judy Shiner, set designer. I loved, she
Judy
has this
Shiner
big
set
mirror.
designer. Judy Shiner set designer. Judy Shiner set designer. Sorry. Sorry.
We have a new vocal stem. We've entered a new vocal stem into the
Sorry. I'm so
into that
sorry.
realm
I
here.
got so
No, I
excited.
love that. I love
Go
this is one
on.
of my favorite things about being friends with Eevee is sometimes you can say something like 4 words and then she gets really excited about them. So
Judy
it's really
Shiner set
exciting.
designer. Okay.
Judy
What were
Shiner,
you
set
saying?
designer. Gen
I'm like
Z's
tearing
Judy
up.
Shiner, set designer.
I'm literally tearing
Yeah,
up.
Eevee cries a lot. I love you
Okay.
so much.
Love you.
I liked it because some of the key things was, I had a huge mirror in her bedroom. Her hair is a big thing. It was covered with hairspray on it. I love she had, I'm pretty sure it was Billy Idol on her wall, who has like spiky brown hair or spiky blonde hair, and she
I
had
didn't know
cut
Billie
out like the
Eilish
letter
was
Spike.
alive back then.
Billy Idol.
Sorry.
I think I might even get clocked. We'll wait to see if Dave
I
or
don't
Jolene
know.
clock me and are like,
Some
that was not Billy Idol. But then she cut this letter Spike at SPIKE out of a magazine, and like that was on her wall. I thought that was very cool. I would be interested to see her bedroom, here versus when she's like in high school and maybe has more posters on her wall and stuff like that. It felt like the beginning stages,
Oh,
you're right, of her coming
yeah.
into her own personality.
Yeah, I feel like I've
Judy Shiner,
heard
set
people
designer.
talk Judy Shiner set designer. I feel I feel like Spike, yeah. I feel like I've maybe heard people talk about Spike's room being like covered in posters, or maybe that's just
Her
like the
real life
vibe.
bedroom. Her real life bedroom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like she gives the vibe of someone who like cuts out magazine clippings like we saw and decorates her room and decorates her space a lot. I feel like Judy Shiner had a lot of fun. In fact, I feel like in your interview with her, maybe Judy Shiner was talking about how Spike's fashion and stuff was fun to play around with.
Mm.
Judy Shiner set designer. Uh,
Judy Shiner, set designer. I did point out that one of the interesting things about Joey's garments too is that he wants to look tough and cool, but he had to buy a jacket that looked tough and cool from the actual tough and cool kid. Which
yeah,
if you listen to the episode that's coming out on my end about making characters about Degrassi, I think that perfectly fits into his character. That he wants to look cool, but he had to get Rick to make the jacket, and he couldn't do it himself.
yeah. He adopts that fashion. He's very
Yeah.
distressed jeans core, like the big
Yeah.
rips in
He
the
wants to
jeans.
look cool.
Bought them like
Especially
that.
when he's like, of course I had sex. It's like, Joey, no, you haven't.
Joey, you have
um,
not kissed anybody. Has he? He's never
no.
kissed anybody at this point, right?
No, 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 no. I think we have a lot still to talk about when it comes to the B plots, but and a little bit more about the behind the scenes of this episode. But first, I wanted to ask you, one of the key things about your podcast that makes it stands out is that you're very good at drawing parallels between this era of the show and TNG. Are there any of the pregnancy storylines that you really feel like this connects to?
Yeah, throughout this whole episode, I was like, how do people not draw more parallels between this and Miles and Lola? I know it's because
Mm.
I have Miles and Lola brain rot and like I look at every situation through a Miles and Lola lens, but
Mhm.
there's so many, like I'm going to make an edit of this and the episode where Lola finds out that she's pregnant, which I don't know any of the next class episode titles, which is insane to me.
I
As
regret
like
nothing. I regret
I
nothing.
regret nothing. Yes. Uh, but there are so many similarities to me in the way that Spike reacts and then the way that Lola reacts to finding out that she's pregnant and kind of exploring those options. And I can
Yeah.
see why. I know that Stefan Brogren, there are interviews online of Stefan Brogren talking a lot about Lola's plotline and how important it is. I think honestly it's probably because it reminds him a lot of the Spike storyline. I think that's my opinion.
Mhm,
I would have to go back. I haven't watched those interviews in a while, but to
mhm,
me, I feel like that's just like the most obviously those go in different directions, but
mhm,
that is the one that just reminds me the most. And it also comes down to Amanda Steptoe and Amanda Arcuri remind me so much of each
mm,
other. They're both like small and they're great actresses. Like to me, the reactions, the faces, all of that were just very similar to me. Like
yeah,
I felt everything that Amanda Steptoe was feeling and showing on her face. And I feel that way about Amanda Arcuri performing as Lola in Degrassi Next Class. Another one, I would say I see a lot of Manny and Craig, which I think is obviously intentional considering the fact that Spike plays a role in Manny's storyline later on.
yeah.
In
How
the
do you think
way
now about the fact that Manny goes to Spike and now you have this kind of lore behind it?
I love it. And I love that Manny decides to have an abortion. I love that we get to see Spike advise somebody who ends up making a different decision. Not
Mm,
advise, but like we get to see Spike be there for somebody who ends up making a different decision and support her through that decision. I think that's really the power of Degrassi exploring and validating all of the different options. Like I really liked when Spike was sitting there and seriously going through all of her options. Like, okay, what about adoption? What about abortion? I don't want to be
mhm,
big and pregnant. Like that is another Lola thing where one of the things that
mm,
she said is I don't want to walk around school and have everybody know.
mhm.
I feel like Manny says that as well. And I think that's so valid. I think a lot of people see that as like vapid or self-centered to not want your body to change. Uh that's so
I don't want
reasonable.
that.
I don't want my
Yeah.
body to change as a full grown adult when your body is literally still going through
Ugh,
puberty and
uh,
changing
uh, uh,
and you don't even have your full like adult
uh-uh.
body yet, why would you want to go? It's not to invalidate those who choose to go through that, and we'll talk about that later because that was an interesting part
Oh,
of the research of the episode. But like, it is so valid for that to be the decision of like, I don't want my body to change.
yes.
Like, that's valid. And I think I'm glad that they explored that in this one, and they explored that with Lola, and they explored that with Manny. And I just think that's such a valid thing to represent instead of like these other dramatic, like, oh, I don't like
Ultimatum, kind of.
yeah,
Yeah.
ultimatum thing. It's like it's okay to just not want your body to change when it's literally still going through puberty, when you're still your
Yeah.
brain isn't even developed. Like you're allowed to not want that.
It's okay. I think we share the same echoes or the same sentiments that Degrassi has, which is we are your body, your choice. We don't choose that. We don't want to choose that, but we want you to have the option to choose that. And that's what I think by knowing that later Spike helps Manny, I think Degrassi's emphasizing that like you can do what you want. Just because Spike kept her baby doesn't mean that she thinks everybody should keep her baby. At this moment in time, she's going through her choices. She's saying, should I have an adoption? Should I do abortion? Should I keep the baby? What are the consequences of that? She's going through my body, my choice, whatever your choice is. And we are pro
We are
choice. We
pro
believe you can do
choice.
whatever you want. We just want the choice to not have to do it.
We want the choice to not have to do it. And I think it was that and to bring it back to the next class plotline again, I think one moment that really stood out to me was Yael being a supportive person. And there was a moment where Lola's like, what would you do in this situation? And Yael's like, it doesn't matter what I would do in this situation. Like, I don't know what I would do in this
Yeah.
situation, but like, it doesn't matter. It matters how you feel. And I really appreciate Degrassi emphasizing that because there's a lot of rhetoric out there prioritizing
Mm-hmm.
other things other than like the gut feeling of like, are you ready? Do you want this? Like that should be the
Yeah.
baseline question before anything else of like, do you want to go through this? There are medical options to not have to go through this. There should be an option to not go through this, and that should be a valid thing to explore. One way this is just
Yep.
turning into the pro-choice podcast, and you know what? You should have gone into it expecting it. You know the contents of this episode.
Exactly. No, and I think it's incredible that because Degrassi has such a long history, we kind of get a little bit of a timeline of the history of abortion because like I love this episode where Spike is really going through her options. I think that audience needed that. I love that Lola starts her episode by saying, no, I know my choice. Now I just got to deal with the consequences and go through this. And then you have Manny in the middle whose episode was so heavily censored. Yes, this episode was censored in the UK and overseas, but it wasn't censored in the US at all. But Manny's episode, when it came to that choice about abortion, was so heavily censored and so like kind of reading the subtext in a lot of the scenes, that I think it's interesting that we have this map about the history of teen pregnancy and abortion, of what it was like socially and what Degrassi was able to do. And then to go from this episode where we like go through the motions of her hooking up and finding out she's pregnant, to then going to Lola, who goes inside an abortion clinic and has those direct conversations. I feel so lucky that our show has so much history to be able to see all of this across all these different generations.
Absolutely. I love seeing the progression, and I think it is so powerful. And I'm so glad that I am able to go back in time and see,
Mm.
like you said, the progression of the way that all of these different topics are told, and these parallels between some things are handled so differently and some things are portrayed so differently between back then and more recent history. And some things are like exactly the same. Some things are timeless. And one of those things
Yeah.
that I think is timeless is like our B plot, the little love triangle crush cuties. Like I think that
I
is,
love them.
and I predicted that we were going to get a silly little B plot, and guess who was right? I was right. And
You
I
were
guessed that
right.
it was going to be Yick and Arthur, and I was right because they are the silly little B plot boys.
They are this. I know you're like. I feel like there was one episode where Arthur and Yick had a silly B plot. I'm like, that's their
that's
plot device.
that's literally their whole bag.
Before we go into that, I just want to say
Yeah.
one other parallel. Liberty and JT, I felt like this kind of connected to theirs in the sense that Liberty really wanted to handle this on her own. And I feel like Spike's storyline was kind of that. There was some moments of connection where Shane came up to her and was kind of like, what are we going to do about this? But she really pushed against him, I felt in some moments. I felt that was the parallel that I felt between Liberty and JT. Did you have anything else about that?
I feel like that's a really good parallel because those situations are very similar, where Liberty is the
Mm-hmm.
one taking things seriously and JT is just like, what? Like, and then he does kind of take it seriously later on, but
One of the reasons I appreciate this episode is because Degrassi is a time capsule of the teen experience. And I think this truly goes to show you that, yes, the media around these conversations may have changed and what Degrassi was able to do on their network may have changed. But the story of being a girl who has sex with a boy that you didn't really want to have sex with, that you weren't ready for, that you didn't really understand what you were getting yourself into, is a timeless story and goes to show you that these are issues that affect teenagers across any generation. There's going to be kids 40 years from now who have the same issue. So this is why I love that Degrassi makes it about the story instead of these big sensationalized headlines that most stories do, of saying you have to look at it black and white. It's either this or that. You either have an abortion or you have a baby. No, they went through, you're a kid, you just had sex, it did it unprotected, you didn't know what you're signing up for. What do you do now? That's what I love about this TV show.
one thing that I also love about this TV show is that it doesn't romanticize or sexualize sex. Like it's
Mm,
not, Spike even
it
says
wasn't a
like
big deal.
I didn't enjoy it. Like I didn't she in Liberty and JT's experience very much isn't really given like in comparison to like a Euphoria. Sex is very awkward, especially when you don't know what's when you're learning. And like
Yeah.
I like that Degrassi represents it not on this like pedestal and this like aspirational thing. It's just like it's a thing that's awkward and not all that enjoyable, and
And sometimes
especially
just happens. Like at
yeah,
a party,
sometimes
sometimes so you have some characters like Claire, who their entire fucking plot is about when the first time they're gonna have sex, and then sometimes you're just at a party and hook up with someone.
yeah.
Sometimes it happens. What do you do?
And I think you said that in the book that tells a little bit more of the story, it's revealed that it's like a 10-second encounter. Like it's not,
In the book, which aren't always necessarily canon, but they take a nugget, they start with an episode like
yeah.
this, and they draw from it. In the book, it's very quick, and he is very much pressuring her into it. She's kind of like, no, I don't
Oh,
really like,
s-
no, like, don't really want to do this, and he's like, no, we should do this.
speaking of, Shane said something of like, you could have stopped me or something like that. I'm like, fuck you, dude.
I hate
Fuck
him. You
you.
could have stopped me. You're
Like you
crazy.
shouldn't have, what? Like anyway,
Yeah,
weirdo.
that's
I'm not
while I love
appreciating
that this
it.
episode does talk about how, like you said, that Spike says, I didn't even like it my first time. I do love that we now officially have it on record that you do not enjoy sex. You're like, I don't like sex. Sex isn't good for the first time. It's really awkward and weird and uncomfortable. I like that. I like that that's officially on your
That's
podcast now.
Eevee Pacini canon. I'm talking about as
One of
teenage
us has sex
anyway.
with boys. One of us doesn't.
And that's what those are the reviews. Yeah, you're
Okay,
like, I can't
Yick
relate.
and Arthur. Yeah, like that. I don't relate to that at all. Yick and Arthur. Okay, this is the thing about Degrassi, because sometimes they do like a serious episode and a silly episode, and sometimes they have Marco getting gay bashed and Snake getting cancer. It's the exact same episode, so you really don't know what their B plots are going to be. But you called it. What? Give me some thoughts on the Yick and Arthur plot, or the Yick and Melanie, I guess, plot.
It's hard because they're all so adorable that I want to support, like, I ship Melanie and Snake, and I ship Yick and Melanie, and I think just like they're just cutie pies. I don't even know. Like, I love, okay, Arthur Kobelowski is literally the cutest pie to ever cutie pie, and I cannot deal with him. He is so sweet and so well-meaning, and you told me a behind the scenes fact that just made me so much more endeared, which is that this plot line was originally supposed to take place between, let me see if I can remember,
I believe in
Arthur
you.
and Vula, which
Yes, Arthur and Vula.
Arthur and Vula, but Duncan Waugh was too shy.
He was too shy to have like a on-screen girlfriend. So
He's so
Salixi
good.
Sanasi, who plays Yick, said that he would stand up and do those types of scenes. So then they changed it to be between him and Melanie.
They're so little, and I
Isn't
love
that
them
so
so much.
cute? Arthur and Vula, like, you and I went to the archives together. And the whole premise, one of the biggest things about Arthur's storyline is that him and Vula were supposed to end up together. And that Stephanie K and Joey were originally going to have this episode. But Linda Schuyler thought that was too on the nose and too obvious. And just to shoehorn a couple more facts in here, this came from Linda's book, but they also thought maybe Caitlin might be the person because she's so innocent and it would be more unsuspecting. But Linda Schuyler in real life, she'd worked with Stacey Mistician since she was in the Kids of Degrassi Streets, and she was like fucking like 5 years old. So she felt very protective of her and didn't want her to have the storyline. And Spike being that character in the background who didn't, you could kind of ascribe whatever personality you wanted to, or give her kind of any background you wanted in this kind of fresh slate. They decided to have it be Spike, someone who's kind of more unsuspecting than someone like Stephanie K. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that that's very interesting, and it ended up being an interesting subversion. I'm curious, if it had been Caitlyn, do you think it would have been Rick that got her pregnant?
Ooh, I wonder. Yeah, I feel like that would have to, that's kind of what they were setting up there.
So it's interesting. They kind of do, no matter what, have this like, well, no, because Stephanie, I was gonna say good girl, bad boy, but like Stephanie's not a bad girl, but she's not like as
I find
innocent.
it
So
so hard to imagine. I can imagine Stephanie if she got pregnant. I feel like she would have an abortion.
she would have an
Caitlyn,
abortion.
I can't imagine Caitlyn Ryan getting pregnant. Like, I just can't imagine her even letting a boy kiss her without, like, she feels very more like punkish in that sense, that she'll tell you to like get away from me.
Yeah,
Whereas
like
Spike she is so punk on the outside, but is still very like, I don't know, seems more reserved and a little shy.
it's very interesting, not to go off track too much, but we talked a little bit about
Mm,
how Spike, the way that Spike presents herself and styles herself versus she's not that like edgy or anything like that.
mm,
So I think she's a very interesting character to do it because she does kind of have that exterior of somebody
mm.
harder, and then on the inside she's just this little soft baby.
Yeah.
So
I feel like her punkness comes more from the fact that she's someone who's more open-minded, less so
yeah,
than confrontational. That's kind of how I perceive. Whereas Caitlyn Ryan is very I actually can't imagine what would happen if Caitlyn got pregnant. Like, that feels crazy to me.
yeah, I think, and that's another parallel that I bring to, I'm just going to continue saying Spike and Lola, where it's not
Spola.
necessary like Lola dyeing her hair. She's not like alternative and like edgy and all that kind of stuff. It's just like a way to express herself. And I feel like that's the same
Yeah.
thing for Spike expressing herself through her hair and her clothing and all of that kind of stuff. It's just an expression of fashion rather than an expression of like rebellion or anything like that. And I think that's
Yeah.
really interesting versus I'm trying to think of some examples of physical like style where I don't know. Anyway,
It's interesting to
moving
think
on.
about. Before I ask you the next question, do you have any other thoughts about the B plot?
I did. Let me try to recall
It
it
was
because there
cute.
was an
You
Arthur.
every
Oh,
time Snake came up on the screen, you thought he was so cute, especially this pimming schools. We
yeah, let's
finally
talk
got
about
to
pimming
pimming schools.
schools.
What did you think about this iconic moment?
It was really cute. I was like, "Be nice, Melanie. Like,
Mm.
stop." She was like, "What are you like?" She was teasing him, and I was like, "He's trying. He's so sweet. Be
She would
nice."
crumble if Snake did that to her. If Snake started laughing at
Literally.
her,
If
she,
she went to try to be courageous to Snake and like give him a little pickup line and he laughed in her face, she would
mm-hmm.
cry. Like, be nice. I think Yick, yeah, see, it's hard because like I said, I think Yick and Melanie are so cute, but I also think Yick and Snake. Yeah, they're cute. Yick and Snake are cute. Yick
Wait,
and
the way I
Melanie.
didn't clock what was wrong, I was like, yeah, Snake.
Snake and Melanie. I know you didn't even react. I think both I could see both. So it's an interesting I love a love triangle where I actually support both. Like that's an effective love
Both
triangle where I
sides.
actually can see and support both sides. Versus like when it was like Miles
Cute.
and Zig with Maya, I'm like, go away, Zig. Like, get
Oh,
out
I
of
hate
here.
Zig.
I hate
I
it. But
hate Zig.
anyway, anyway, but yeah, I think that they were so cute. There was something else about that I wanted to touch on before we moved on.
We did talk about, I thought it was funny the scene wherever Snake catches Arthur and Yick. Arthur is very like secure in himself. He like just got caught doing this little
Yes.
flirty scene with his best friend. Arthur does not care.
But that's the funny thing is that like it really shows how it is being that age because Arthur, like Duncan, the actor who plays Arthur, doesn't give me shy vibes. Like he's very like
Mm.
puffs up his chest to Snake, like isn't really like isn't shy in that regard. So it's funny to think it's just because it's a girl and like it's
Mm.
this romance like he because of those like hormones and being like growing up, he's not comfortable doing
Mm-hmm.
that. But like he's so comfortable and confident and like he's the I would say he's more like the JT of the JT if it's JT and Toby. Like
Mm.
he's more the outgoing, confident one in that regard. But then yeah, just the idea that he couldn't act with a girl, like opposite a girl is so
So
cute. So
cute.
cute
So
because
cute.
Yick plays the shy man very well. So it's interesting that the
Mm.
actor wasn't as shy and was like willing to step up and take this plot.
He's so cute. What do you think the future of this plot is? Do you think Arthur, oh my gosh, do you think Yick and Melanie are going to get together? Do you think Melanie and Snake are going to get together? Do you think it's going to fizzle out? What do you think?
I think that's interesting. I don't think that Melanie and Yick are gonna play out full time. I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's gonna be a situation where I don't know. That's interesting because I think maybe Snake will notice Melanie and kind of not even intentionally steal her away, but like
Mm-hmm.
get her attention and give her the attention that she's looking for, and she'll kind of like neglect Yick and not take him
Mm.
seriously because is he are they the same grade?
They're in the same grade, and Snake is 1 year older.
Yeah, okay. So, because to me, Yick is like so much shorter than him, or Yick is so much shorter than her and like gives me
Mm-hmm.
younger vibes because they're the same age.
Mm-hmm.
Versus I can see Melanie gravitating towards Snake if he gives her attention, which I could see
Yeah, she wants an older
him
man
giving
for
her.
sure.
Yeah, she wants an older man.
I like
So
that.
that's my prediction is that it's not going to go too much
Okay.
further and Snake's going to sweep her off her feet.
That's so cute. Okay, I wanted to ask about that because I want to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes of this episode more because it's crazy that this episode was banned overseas. It was banned in the UK. It actually caused them to stop airing Degrassi Junior High altogether for a little bit. But also, it's the episode that won an Emmy and led to them naming her Emma. So I'm curious about your thoughts about the controversy of the award. Do you think it deserved to be banned given its time frame? Do you think this episode did deserve an award? What are your thoughts about that?
It's hard to say because I have never like lived back then and I don't consume a lot of content from this era. so I don't have much of a comparison point of what. I don't think that this is that crazy. Like, I do think
Mhm.
it is really hitting on some important topics, but it doesn't feel, I don't know, I guess it does feel, it's hard to really put it in the context of a world that I've never lived in, which I think is an interesting part of my podcast, is trying to put myself in this world that I've never experienced. Because to
Mm.
me, this feels like a really good, informative episode of television. Like, even if I saw this airing today, I would be like, damn, like that's really well done and really
Yeah.
informative. But to me, it aligns with my beliefs and it aligns with my
Mm.
morals and all of that. So I don't find it controversial, but I think somebody from a different point of view who has different beliefs and different morals and kind of is more pearl clutchy and more like conservative, I guess would be the real word, not pearl clutchy, but somebody who is more conservative, if I try to put myself in their shoes, I don't think it's ban worthy still. I think it's educational, but I
Yeah.
guess especially, well,
87. And she's a girl who she from the show, a girl who consents to having sex and like seems to want to have sex, or like at least,
yeah.
is okay with happening, and contemplates an abortion at 14 on public school
So, yeah.
funded television. But
Okay, putting it in the
I agree
perspective
though,
of
because
school-funded television is like I'm trying to think
yeah,
of
like PBS or whatever.
like Arthur?
Like Arthur, yeah, this aired on PBS in the US. So that's the thing that I think is I agree, because I know anecdotally that the episodes, like they talk about AIDS, they talk about HIV, pregnancy and stuff. I know anecdotally that this was controversial, but you and I have not lived through that to know that that's controversial. But I imagine it's maybe even similar to them when they had their first trans character on TV later. We kind of have a better understanding of how crazy that was.
Yeah.
That gives me kind of the ability to go back and think about it. But just anecdotally, yeah, a 14-year-old girl who openly was like, yeah, I'll have sex and contemplated abortion in 1987 on PBS public television feels insane. Also, to our point, we love Degrassi so much that Degrassi shaped our values and morals. So, of course, this doesn't seem crazy to us.
Yeah, that's very true. Literally, I have lived with Degrassi for almost 20 years at this point. So
Yeah,
I
Linda raised us.
Yeah, I started watching Degrassi when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I'm 26 years old. So I have lived
Yeah.
longer with Degrassi than without Degrassi by far. It definitely
Yeah.
shaped my morals and my view of the world around me. And yeah, I would be interested to like show my parents this episode because I don't think they've ever seen this episode and be
Mm,
like, what? How do you think you would have felt watching this? I don't know. I
yeah.
don't know. It's interesting. I
I don't know.
it's I
Do you
don't know. It's hard to put myself it really is hard to put myself in the context of a world that I never lived in, like I said.
absolutely. Do you think it deserved an Emmy?
Yeah, it's just like a good I was sucked in. Like I was
Mm,
into it. It's a really good, well-rounded, well-paced episode of television. Like it felt very
mm.
complete from start to end. It felt Yeah, it didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel like there were any moments that were like taking too much time. Everything was like Amanda Steptoe is such a good freaking actress. Like everyone,
She did
the
incredible. I believed every moment.
one thing which you'll have to remind me, one thing that stood out to me as weird was the little like 10-second clip of Yick and Melanie ice
Oh
skating,
yeah.
which is just like, okay, you said that that was cut
It
out
felt
of,
like interesting timing of
yeah,
the
it's
Canadian. Yeah,
like,
well, the Canadian me and Eevee, I always encourage Eevee to watch the American one because the American ones are longer. But in America, because it aired on stations like PBS that didn't have commercials, they needed it to be longer. Whereas here it would air on network. So they had to cut certain moments out so they could fit
yeah,
commercials in. So that little skating moment, as far as I remember, because I had never seen it before, that skating moment isn't in the Canadian version. So those are the types of scenes that they would cut out to save time.
yeah, it was just like Spike goes into the doctor's office and then we cut to Yick and Melanie skating along and then we cut
Skating.
back to Spike being like, "Mom, I'm pregnant."
Mom,
And
I'm
like
pregnant.
that's just wild.
An interesting scene as well, because originally they'd actually filmed two endings. They did not know if they were going to be able to have Spike be pregnant. So they filmed that scene twice. They had her say, Mom, I'm pregnant. And then they had her go back in and come out and say, Mom, I'm not pregnant. What do you think about that?
I think that that's interesting, but I think they set that up very well. Actually, in the car, Spike talking to her mom, say her mom Spike's mom says something along the lines of like, even if you're not pregnant, it'll be good for you to go in and talk to the doctor and like get some
Mm,
information. So I think that set up for that ending, and that's a really good lesson. Like if you have a pregnancy scare, yeah, you can just like take a test at home and deal with the emotions privately, but I think if you have a pregnancy scare, it's smart to go to a doctor and get that information straight from a doctor instead of just like experiencing that at
mhm.
home and just like living with that experience. Like I think that's really good advice, honestly, to anybody that is like
Yeah.
possibly thinking that they're pregnant. Like, go to a doctor whether or not you end up being pregnant, because a doctor can give you
Mm,
so much more and you're going to take it more seriously. You're going to remember that more seriously if you went to a doctor and talked to a doctor than if you're just privately processing these emotions alone. That set up for that possible ending of her not being pregnant really well and still taught a good
I agree.
lesson.
I agree. I think the other point about doctors, now not across the board, I know some doctors are kind of crazy, but they're more level-headed. They see people like you every day. And even if it's not necessarily just about finding out if you're pregnant, the comfort that the audience got whenever Lola went to the abortion clinic and said, "Am I the first 16 you've ever done this to?" And he said, "You're not the first 16-year-old today."
I
I'm
get
confident. Yeah,
chills.
chills.
I literally get chills
So
every time I
that's
see that scene, and every time anybody even repeats those lines, I get full body chills. Like that is
yeah, it
so
makes me want to cry.
meaningful. My
And
like
that's the effects of going to ask for help for someone who just like sees this happen all the time and is so non-judgmental about it, to be like, yeah, this happens all the time, like let's just talk about it. Even if it's you think you might have HIV, or maybe you're addicted to something, like these people, these professionals deal with this constantly and are there because they want to help you and don't have judgment. So I'm glad that Degrassi instills those values.
Lola going to her doctor about like trying to masturbate and not being able to figure that out, and her doctor's
Yeah.
like, "No, you're fine. You're normal. Like you're
Yeah.
not weird." I think it's so helpful
Yeah.
to not across the board. Obviously, there are doctors who are not great. There are resources
Yes.
that end up not being great, but it is so great to have resources and to show that resources are available and can be helpful. And I think that's so valuable of Degrassi to continually show things like that, like going into the doctor's office and yeah, that Lola scene, sorry, it gets me
Oh,
every time.
you're not the first
Um,
16-year-old today. Like that's crazy.
like that's so validating.
It is. And I think that's why Degrassi is important, because it shows you to go through those resources. Those resources.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to tell you too is I know that from studying the show so much, that Amanda Steptoe actually originally thought that this script was ridiculous. She thought like, oh my God, like I learned so much about sex ed in the school that I went to. How could this episode even be possible? And when they read it through the round table, those kids were also kind of, the Degrassi kids were kind of like, this kind of feels unrealistic that this would happen. But through talking to more people that's this affected, and of course doing the research, Amanda realized, especially after the fact of meeting people who had gone through this, realized like how true to life this episode actually was for people, and kind of changed her opinion about it after after filming it and meeting people who were affected.
Did she talk to pregnant teens in Degrassi Talks?
She did. Yeah, that's where that story comes from. Is from her. Look at
Yeah.
you.
I know what I'm talking about. I can't watch Degrassi Talks for another several years.
It's really sad. It's really sad. We get requests on the Discord all the time to watch it. I'm like, I emotionally can't watch one episode, so no. But it is a really good show, and you'll have to watch it.
I like the idea that the writers and the team behind Degrassi took the teens' opinions into consideration, but didn't necessarily take it as, because if they had taken those reactions and just like ran with it, then we wouldn't have this episode. If it was just like, oh, that's ridiculous,
Yeah,
and they would have just
yeah,
changed it and moved on. So I think it's valuable to take that criticism and those opinions in
in
like
full context.
in conjunction with the research that you've done and their knowledge as writers and all of that kind of stuff. Like that's just one piece of the
Yeah,
puzzle in the
because
accuracy of these stories.
absolutely, one of the things that Loretta, the researcher, had talked about is how she had gone on in with this bias that most girls would probably either want to have an abortion or give their babies up if they were teenagers, and that was not the case. She found overwhelmingly a lot of the kids wanted to keep their babies, which is why it was decided that Spike would keep her baby. But I think that's, if I went into a thing interview like that, I would assume most people would want to have an abortion, because that's a choice that I would want to make. Like you and I have talked, we don't want to
Yeah.
have children, we don't want to have children in our bodies. So that's the bias that I would have gone into to be like, oh, most kids probably would choose abortion if they were more educated on it. But no, a lot of kids wanted to keep their babies, and that's why they were able to find so many pregnant teen mothers. And they were not able to find a lot of teen dads, which is why, because they always step out of the picture, which is I think why Degrassi typically does that, especially in the Lola episode, to not even have Miles involved, because it's not about the boys, but also a lot of boys choose not to be a part of it.
Like both parties go into it, but then the girl is typically the one that is dealing with the repercussions of the action, and the boys can so
Yeah,
easily
she
walk
bears the
away from it.
responsibility.
She bears the responsibility, and she's the one that has to take this seriously. And that's just the
Yeah.
reality of the situation. Yeah, I think it's very interesting just to go back a little bit to that research and those teenagers who, like, that representation of teenagers who decide to keep their that who decide to keep their babies. That is why representation of different stories is so important, because like I couldn't imagine, like we said, like being in that position and
Oh,
wanting to keep a baby. I can understand deciding that it's the best for my body, or deciding that it's the best whatever to keep the baby and go through it. But I can understand not wanting to go through with an abortion, and I can understand like not morally
yeah.
agreeing with abortion for yourself personally, but I can't but that doesn't mean that it's not real. That doesn't mean that that's not something that real people
Yeah.
feel and experience. And that's why it's so important to represent those things. I have found so much value as a viewer in experiencing things through a screen that I'm never going to experience myself,
Yes.
and never going to be able to put myself in those shoes. This show's good. I'm kind of into it. I love it.
The show's so good. I love this show. I know
I
it has
love
made
it.
me more it's educated me so much because like we've said a million times, we're not people who are interested in getting pregnant or anything like that. You know, my friends who have gone through either pregnancy and have been very happy that they're pregnant, or have gone through abortions and were did not plan to get pregnant. It's made me like see the full spectrum and just be like, yeah, you're a person, you deserve a choice. And I think I learned these lessons from Degrassi, from showing all these different kinds of the stories of how does a 14-year-old get pregnant, or how does someone get pregnant that doesn't want to get pregnant. And I also want to emphasize, Evie and I have talked a lot about, we've said like the boy, the girl. I
Yeah.
believe that you can be a man with a uterus. Like we are so trans friendly. I'm on my own little trans journey here, but
We're saying girl and boy, but that is obviously,
yeah,
those are umbrella representations of situations, and there are many different configurations, just to clarify that. But when we
we're
say that,
so my body, my
we are.
choice. Do whatever you want.
My body, my
Well, you
my
know,
body is a cage, and my choice is a cage. Am I right?
oh, I like that. I like that a lot. I love little Judy Shiner set designer. I think we
Your set
really
designer.
covered the episode. What I want to know is your kind of thoughts going forward. We talked about Melanie and Yick, but what do you think is next? This is one of the plot lines that we know we're gonna see Spike again. She's gonna be dealing with her pregnancy. Some of the just general questions I'm gonna throw out here. What do you think about her relationship with Shane? Do you think it gets rocky? Do you think they stay together? Do you think they stay broken up? Do you think she considers her other options? Do you think she takes any of them seriously? Do you think she dates anybody else? What's kind of in your mind in terms of the future of Spike's character in these early seasons? And when do you think she's gonna have her baby?
Well, for her sake, I hope that she and Shane break up, but I do think that they will probably stay involved for a little bit. But I don't think that he's gonna stick around for, like, not in terms of leaving the show, but in terms of staying in the relationship. I
Mhm.
don't think that he's going to stay and be a supportive boyfriend throughout the whole pregnancy. I think they're probably gonna end up breaking up before. They just don't seem very stable, and he doesn't seem
Mm.
like a good support. And maybe he could come around. Maybe this is just his first reaction, but he doesn't give me the vibes of someone who's going to stick around. I don't know if I can see Spike dating anybody while she's pregnant, but maybe,
Mm.
I don't know, because if I try to scan who she's who she could possibly date, I don't even see anybody. Like, I'm gonna
Mm.
say no. I'm gonna say that she's not gonna get involved with anybody else while she's pregnant, but she's also not going to be like
Okay.
steadily an item with. I think they're gonna be like co-parenting more than
Mm.
dating. That's my prediction for that
Okay.
one. And
Do
I
you think
don't
she'll
think that
pursue any other
she's.
options?
I don't think that she will meaningly. I don't think that she will meaningfully pursue other options. I think it's gonna
Mm.
be the next thing that we're gonna see, maybe an episode or 2 later. I don't think we'll necessarily see it in the next episode. She'll have decided that she's keeping the baby. I don't think that we're going
Mm.
to like she's not going to like meet adoptive parents then decide to go against it or anything like that. I don't think she's going to go any further really, other than like maybe thinking about it off screen. So I think that's my prediction in that regard.
And
And
when do you think she's gonna have Emma?
I think I said this earlier in the episode, but I think end of season 2 or maybe season 2, that's like a mid-season finale or a finale thing. So I
Mm,
think we got to do mid-season 2 finale or season 2 finale depending on the pacing of the season, which I have no concept of what the season's going to be paced like. I don't even have a concept of like how much time has passed in these episodes, like a couple months, I guess.
that's true.
So
Yeah. Well, even just in this episode, the starts at the party, and then Joey comes up and says, "Hey, what happened at that party last month?" So even just now, we've jumped a month ahead, which you
yeah.
clocked right away. You're like they're gonna do a time jump.
Yeah, I'm like I don't she hasn't, because I had heard something about when we were on the Degrassi tour, you're like, oh, this is the house that Spike got pregnant in, or something like that, because it was
Mm,
Linda Schuyler's house. So I knew that she got pregnant at a house party, but I didn't know, or I knew
mm,
like it something transpired at a party. So I knew that, and then I knew like the episode's called It's Late, so obviously there would have to be some time jump. Like it doesn't just happen overnight. That's not one of, is that
mm-hmm.
one of those myths? Like the next day,
You
like
wake up the next day. Oh
you
yeah, I've
just
seen some crazy
no.
myths lately that immediately, craziness.
Yeah.
Without getting into all of that, you only have 2 episodes left of this season. Who's your next guest?
The next episode is Parents' Night, correct? And that's
Yeah.
a Wheels episode. So who would be a good, maybe I could record it on a
Ooh.
Wheels Wednesday perhaps?
Wheels Wednesday with Degrassi CSI.
Wednesday, that's right. So my next guest is the amazing Degrassi CSI, who I am super excited to host on here. And I believe this would be his podcast debut, right? I don't think he's ever been on a
Ooh, good
podcast.
question.
I feel special. I'm
Well, we're
getting him
fake
on here.
fans if we haven't heard it.
We're big fans. If we haven't heard it, I'm sorry, Degrassi CSI, if that's the case. But no, I'm super excited to have Degrassi CSI on my next episode. We met in August at Smoky
I
Mountain Fan
love him.
Fest. So I'm really excited. And then I've got the last episode is Revolution, which who am I having on for that one?
I don't know. I'll have to find out. How do you feel about the fact that you only have 2 episodes left for the first season? Do you think you'll get them done by the end of the year? Is that your
That
goal?
that is my goal. It
I believe in you.
is the end of November, so I would really have to get on it and stay on my podcasting flow, which is hard. It's hard. I'm sorry for my release schedule, you guys. I'm trying. But I would
I
love to
No,
get
you're
I would love to
good.
get through it. I would love to get through
I believe in
season 1
you.
by the end of the year.
I love doing these episodes with you, and I love listening to your podcast. And I know that once you're in it, you love doing it. It's just a matter of doing it. I said, Eevee, we are sitting down at 2 p.m. today and recording this podcast, whether you want to or not. And now we're here, and look at how much fun you had. You learned so much more
I
about the show.
know. We did so well. I'm so excited to release this and hear everybody's thoughts. Yeah, once I'm into the podcasting flow, it's fun and easy, but it's just the planning part of it that's paralyzing, and the finding
I get
time
it.
in my making time in my schedule. Not even finding time. I have time, but then like TikTok exists and I love scrolling. So
I love scrolling. Well, it's okay that this
I
episode is
love my
late because
scrolling. I love my
I
scrolling.
scroll now. I scroll now.
Yes, you go to lunch and then you scroll.
I
It's
scroll now. It's so
late.
confusing. It's late. The episode was late because it was topical of the episode. Well, Eevee Pacini, I think we did it.
I think we did it. I am so happy that we got this episode in the can. Do we have any more thoughts before we say goodbye to the Panthers? Anything you
I
want
think
to
we covered it. We talked about the history of the show. If you go read the Wikipedia article, last time I checked, it was credited in it, which is pretty cool. And yeah, there's a lot about the history of this episode of what could have been, and I think it is incredible. Evie, what do you think now that you've conquered the best episode of Degrassi? Most important, I should
the
say.
best episode? It's all downhill from here. Oh no.
No, it's just so monumental. Like this changes so much in the show.
This is the one that everyone I feel like has been waiting for me to get to. And I get it
Yeah.
now. I get it. This is a really good freaking episode. Like the other episodes had good, cute moments in them, and I appreciate them for what they are, and I appreciate them for being
Mm.
parts of Degrassi history. But this is like this is definitely my favorite episode so far, and it makes me want to watch more Degrassi Junior High. I love everybody. I love I love Snake. I want more Snake.
I love Snake. I
I
love my
love my
Snake.
Snake.
I am really excited that you only have 2 episodes left. I love you so much, and I feel very special that I got to be on your podcast, and I can't wait until you get to the finale. You're so close.
Yeah, can I okay. I don't I want to quickly make some predictions of what I think is going to happen before the end of the season. Can I do that?
Okay,
Except I
please.
have no predictions. I'm like I don't know. Um I
Well, let's
don't
talk. Let's just throw out some
know.
character names. Do you think
Yeah.
anything? The first episode. Let me get the episodes. I know the first episode was about Stephanie K. Do you have any predictions about if we're going to see from
Her
Stephanie K again?
and maybe her and Wheels. I don't know. I feel like her and Wheels are kind of cooled off. Like I don't think anything else is going to happen with her and Wheels. I
Yeah.
think I don't know. I really can't picture what direction Stephanie K is going to go in, like at all. I think
That's interesting.
I love how up in the air this is because I can't feel this way about any other era of Degrassi. Like I know it's so deep in my core that I can't imagine
Hmm.
being like, I don't know what's going to happen next because I know everything. And I literally really don't have predictions. Like I think there'll be a little bit more with like Yick and Melanie, and I think it's Melanie, I think is really going to her main love interest is going to be Snake. I think Yick is just like a
Mm,
little flirtation that she's not going to take seriously and that she's kind of going to do wrong, like kind of
mm,
ghost for lack of a better term. Like she's kind of going to not
yeah.
give him the time of day. I think obviously now I know that Arthur is not going to be in any romantic plot line at this point because he's a little shy boy. I We haven't seen
I
Caitlyn
didn't
in a little
consider that
bit.
that was a spoiler.
That is kind of
Oh
a
yeah,
spoiler.
Caitlin.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry.
I feel like we need some Caitlyn and some Joey to come back around
Mm,
by the end of this. I think the end of the season will have. I know the next episode is Wheels heavy, and
mm.
okay. I don't want to spoil it too much because I know Taylor is watching this for the first time. Taylor, cover
Childhood
your
Taylor.
ears. I know something happens with Wheels' family, but I don't know the specificity of it.
I'm rolling
I
my eyes at you
know.
because you spoiled yourself on this
Have we
one.
told this? Have we told the story on the podcast? I think we did in my Toronto Adventures episode, but I was looking at a poster that gives like episode summaries, and I was like, I shouldn't look at this because it's gonna spoil me. And then I read the one about
And then she looked
Wheels.
at it.
Yeah, so I know a little spoiler about Wheels and his dad.
She literally went, if I read this, I'm gonna get spoiled, and then read it out loud, and then went, fuck. I was like, what are you doing? Don't look at the
Well,
rest of it.
well, luckily that was several months ago, and it's kind of fuzzy now. So I don't feel like I fully
Yeah.
know what's gonna happen or what. Yeah, I think Wheels is gonna have a moment. I think Joey and Caitlyn, not together, but Joey and Caitlyn separately will have some sort of plots before the end of the season. I feel like they've got to have a little
Mm.
time to shine before the end of the season. There's only 2 episodes left.
Wheels, Joey, Caitlin. You think they're gonna kind of be the enders here?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe a little
We'll have to
Kathleen.
see.
Maybe a little
I love
Kathleen.
Kathleen.
I
Love
can't ever
Kathleen.
remember Kathleen's name. Every time I talk about Melanie and Kathleen, I'm like, Melanie and
That girl.
what's her name? That girl. So,
Kathleen.
okay.
I like
I
that.
I
Cool.
think I think we have an episode, Degrassi Kid. How are you feeling?
I think we did a really good job. I'm proud of you for watching one of the most iconic episodes. Cannot wait to hear what you and Ruben talk about in the Parents' Night.
I cannot wait to talk to him about Parents' Night.
I like that.
I
Okay.
appreciate you so much for coming on and for sharing your Degrassi wisdom with me. You are the best. You are the goat, the Degrassi goat,
Degrassi
and
goat.
I love you so much. Bah. Yeah, that was a goat.
I like that.
Okay.
I love you so much, and you're my best friend in the entire world. Love you.
I love you. Can we say bye to the Panthers?
Yeah.
Well, you're a goat, so you
Bye,
better run because the
Panthers.
Panther's gonna eat you.
Oh my, I'm not liking the way that this analogy is going.
Okay, never mind. Let's say goodbye to the Panthers in a totally normal way without any
Okay.
analogies. We are Jocelyn and Evie, and we are saying goodbye to the Panthers. Bye, Panthers.
Bye,
Panthers.
Panthers.
Bye, Panthers.